it's true I was a Northern Ireland minister, as was Des, of course, at a time when the government was actually focused on trying to improve and implement the peace process. And one of the things that has struck me very strongly since I left office as a minister in 2010, although I wasn't in the Northern Ireland office by that point, because we'd managed to succeed in reintroducing devolution, was that we focused a lot of our time and attention as Northern Ireland ministers, direct rule ministers at that time, in trying to heal divisions, in trying to implement and improve the peace process, in trying to recreate devolution when it ran into a problem or two. And one of the things that struck me since we lost office is it doesn't seem to me that there's been as much time and effort and focus placed by our government since 2010 on implementing, retaining, deepening and strengthening the peace process in Northern Ireland. I think that I agree very much with Des that is symbolised in fact by the fact that we currently don't have, we're in a no man's land in terms of the peace process. We don't have Stormont and the devolution. We don't have a government, the UK government, being an honest broker because they're dependent for their, there's not really a majority, but for any attempt to win a close vote, they're dependent upon one side, one party in Northern Ireland, and that inevitably creates problems in terms of being an honest broker over there. And that struck me very strongly, and we've been drifting along to a degree without focusing on implementing and strengthening and improving and implementing the Good Friday Agreement. And I think that, whilst it worked for a while, it's getting to a point at which it could become dangerous. And of course Brexit and the implication for the border of that might just be the thing that finally pitches the peace process that we were starting to take for granted as being a done deal and as being something that was happening and good and would endure, that might make it that much more difficult. Now, our Prime Minister, who it seems to me, even more than her predecessor, and he was pretty cavalier with our constitutional arrangements, but our Prime Minister as recently as Sunday has done a piece in the Sunday Times saying, and these are mantras, we're going to leave the customs union, we're going to leave the single market, we're going to take back control of our borders, we're going to take back control of our money, we're going to take back control of our laws, but there'll be no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, or between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. Now, anybody with a rational mind could tell you that those things are incompatible. They cannot all be true. They cannot all be delivered. Of course, you can say them all as a mantra, but if you then try and translate that into practical reality, it's I think, impossible, and it's impossible to do. And what we're seeing is she's desperately trying to make sure that she can get an agreement for the June Council meeting that says the backstop will do all of these things. Get the EU 27 to start talking about the relationship after Brexit, without actually having to explain in any detail what the backstop means and how these things can all be done at the same time. And of course, the practical reality of the Good Friday Agreement is that that made the border a point and a part of cooperation between people in the north and in the south of the island, whereas Brexit makes it a point of contention again and possibly reintroduces a hard border by default or by practical reality, because it will be a state border for tax, excise and legal jurisdiction. It is. If we're not in the single market and the customs union, then there's no way in which I can see you can prevent there being some kind of border infrastructure apart from perhaps magical thinking or as yet uninvented technology. Now, I don't think either the EU27 nor the Irish government will allow the UK government to get away with that. So I do think there is a crunch coming. But the other thing that struck me very strongly being a Northern Ireland minister, and has struck me also very strongly in a different way about Brexit, about the process of the UK voting as it did, or England mainly, but the UK voting as it did, is that it's all about the politics of division. One of the things about being a minister in Northern Ireland, when I walked in there to do the job that I did, one of the things that was different was that you were in a society that had hardwired divisions, that had practical divisions. Everybody went to their own schools, different schools. There were peace walls. There were different communities that were coherent within themselves but suspicious of the other communities. And part of learning to do a decent job there and try and do good was to understand those divisions, to take policy decisions and implement policies that were about healing those divisions. And I never thought for a minute that we were going to start introducing, not the same kind of divisions, but very tough divisions like that in our own society, in England, in Liverpool, in the rest of England in particular, but in the rest of our country. But what Brexit did and what that vote did, it wasn't a rational vote. It was an emotional spasm. People didn't vote. They voted for many different reasons. They voted to leave for many different reasons, and not all of which were to do with the European Union. And the consequences of that vote have introduced a lot of divisions into our society. Divisions between Leavers and Remainers. We still talk about, well, I was a Remainer. I voted Remain. You know, you voted Leave. It's all you visiting this on us all. It's all your fault that everything's going to go to hell. Or generational divisions. Many families were divided. Close-knit families were divided by Brexit and by the referendum. Not only did a lot of young people resent not having the opportunity to vote when it's absolutely certain that the impact of the vote will have more influence on their lives than it will on the lives of their elderly relatives. But we've introduced divisions that have not been healed, and our government has not attempted to heal divisions that have been introduced by that vote, tried to bring together the country in a national debate. They could have done this after the referendum. They could have said, right, we're now going to have a national debate about what this means and how we're going to do it, try and get to a consensus. They didn't do that. They said Brexit means Brexit, our way or the highway, you're a Ramona, we're going to do it in a way that suits keeping me in office, and if you don't like it, well, you can take a running jump you lost. Now, that isn't the way to go forward as a society. That's creating political division that at some point has to be healed. And it's our young people who, after 10 years of putting up with austerity in this country, if Brexit goes ahead, are now going to have another 10 years plus of adjusting to the smaller, weaker, poorer, nastier society that we're creating. And I, for one, didn't go into politics to create a poorer, nastier, smaller, more hideous society. I went into politics to try and improve things for people, to try and make things better, to try and give people more chances in life, which is what those of us who had the pleasure to be Northern Ireland ministers managed to actually achieve when we were over there. So some of us are still up for trying to stop this if it can be stopped, and don't rule out the fact that it can be stopped, because I don't think things are at all sure, and I think the government's majority is such that anything could happen later this year. So I'll leave it there.